Now on today's video, we're going to go from the final coat of primer to the basic coats of clear that go on before trim, or for some people it might be the final clear. So if you've never seen a whole paint job from primer to clear, it'll all be on this video. And I tried to keep it simple, tried to keep it short, and at the same time not leave out any steps. Now because I've made thousands, literally thousands of painting tutorial videos, I know what the pitfalls are. I know what people that have learned how to paint in my shop, they ask the questions. I hope I've been able to answer most of them on this video and steer you clear of some of the things that might be a problem and what products to use or not use. Well, anyway, we're going to get busy on this. You can watch it in 4K, adjust your settings accordingly. Now, the last work session that we had, we got, I think, the final contours on this. There's a couple little places I want to make adjustments on this, and I want to sand out the primer, get it as smooth as I possibly can with 400 paper, and give it one final coat of primer. There's a couple little things I want to address here with 400 sandpaper. We're coming up on having this ready to paint, and I think it's a beautiful day for painting. If I can get this all squared away this morning, this afternoon, we'll be painting it. Now normally, if I were just doing a part that I wasn't super fussy about, one coat of primer would be all I would do. But what I wanted to do, I tried to use the dry sandpaper. It was getting gooey and gummed up a little bit. Not sure, maybe the primer had to dry an extra day. I'm not sure. Usually after 24 hours you don't get that. But the solution to it is just use wet and dry sandpaper and some soapy water. And in this case, that of course worked perfectly. If you put a couple of drops of dish detergent and water, it just makes the sandpaper last a lot longer. Now I'm using a soft block. I want to be ultra fussy about this part. I don't want to have any defects in it at all. It sits right on top of the motorcycle where you can see every little, if there's a mistake or a scratch or a bug or something, whatever. I want it to be as good as I can possibly make it. And I really paid the price every step of the way. But this is 400 sandpaper wet. It's a step a lot of people leave out. I guess, you know, sometimes even I get away with it. But when you really have that commitment that you want it as good as you can make it, I would take and sand the primer with a block, 400 sandpaper wet. Make sure it's dry. Dry it with a hairdryer when you're done, or just put it outside for 10-15 minutes. Because if you trap any moisture under the final coat of primer, you can tend to get little baby bubbles in the paint that you really have to sand out, or in some other way it's a defect somewhere down the road. So that's good information. That's a good tip, by the way. I had to do a couple little, you can see the parts that are green. I wanted to make them even better than they were. They were pretty good, but I just thought, I could just get one more little sand out there and a little more primer, and you can see the carbons coming through in some spots. What usually that tells you is that's the high spot when you're block sanding. So all of this work that you put into it, ultimately when you put that final coat of clear on and it's buffed out and you put it out in the sun, you look back and you don't think for a minute, wow, I spent an extra half hour, 45 minutes, but you do see that part and you see the shine and the levelness, the beauty of it, and you see it for as long as you have the motorcycle. Now the primer sealer. Primer sealer is what I like to use on all composite or all plastic, or if you're painting over other paintwork. Now, because this is going to be the final coat of clear, I want it to go on as thin as possible. I'm not trying to use the primer like Bondo, where I fill in low spots. They make primer filler for that. That's not what I want to use it for. But I looked outside and I saw we're expecting a quick thunder shower to roll through, and I wanted to get this drying up by a heating vent. So what I have is I have a fan, of course, blowing outside, and this is really an inconvenient way of doing it, but otherwise this would have become a two-day job. I didn't want to have that. And I knew it was going to clear up in the afternoon. They were expecting it to get up to 70 degrees. It probably would have been a nice riding day today. But here, it's still chilly outside, and Karen still has the heat on. And I want the coat to have the part to have one coat of primer, and give it a half hour or so up by the heating vent, and we'll be ready to get the blue paint out. Now, there's a couple of tips about using this type of paint, and this is a custom mixed by Chard, by Dennis at Chard, to match the MT09. Colorite is another source of paint. He mixed this with Chromax, so I'm using Chromax thinner, medium temperature thinner, 50-50. Now, tip number one, when you're going to mix custom colors, save that label with the formula if you ever need more, and try not to use the last little bit, so if you use later, you want to do a part like this, you have the paint, you don't have to go spend $300 for another amount of paint. Always bleed the compressor, get all the moisture out of it. I put a video out on my channel of installing this moisture separator. It has been a godsend. It has really made the final coats of clear lay down so much better without the moisture in them and the little bubbles and imperfection that come along with that. So I'm real happy with that. That was a really good investment. And what I try to show here, I set up to do blue. I've done this before. I've done it a lot, in fact. I want to get the coats on thin, many coats thin, not blow it on like I'm painting a car. I've done that in the past. I've tried to do it with one thick coat, and it just, because the paint has metallic and pearl and little iridescence in it, it doesn't lay down right unless you really get it on with I think this is the best way that I've been able to get on, with a lot of thin coats. Now, I went through this quickly. I didn't want the video to go on forever, but a lot of thin coats. All right, up by the heating vent here, and again, the heat is still on, so that's going to dry up. This worked out great. I had it sitting under the vent while I did some other things around the house. We're getting ready for the master planting of the garden. Then once it's dry, and that's about an hour is ideal, 45 minutes to an hour, I like to use the Gavco to fast hardener. The clear is not critical. I have found other clears that are just as good, but Gavco is the one. Of course, I'm always at Gavin's where they sell it. Anyway, keeping the nozzle of the gun when you're not using it, the whole tip, and this is my clear gun, and I never put any colored paint in the clear gun, have a special gun. These guns are only about 25 bucks each, so it doesn't even matter. They're all Harbor Freight. Almost everything in my shop, the compressor, the hose, the guns, all Harbor Freight. And it works fine. So for people that are doing it professionally, it's a whole different thing. But I think the quality of my work, it speaks for itself. There's no point even going there. But mixing the paint, I don't like to have somebody talking to me. I don't like to have any distractions at all. And it's 4-to-1. And of course, anything two-part, you want to stir real well. When you think it's stirred, stir it a little bit more and stir it with a piece of metal. This is a drill rod. I have heard, and I've heard it from several people, that you use a wooden paint stick and it pulls out some of the chemical from the hardener, but I don't know if that's totally true or if that's an old wives' tale. But I know one thing that is true. These guns, they're very inexpensive and they work fine. And especially in my case where I'm going to buff everything out and I paint outdoors, they're fine. But they do leak at the top, so I always put a piece of blue tape up there just to prevent them dripping on my shoes or on the part, even worse. And I always use, this is a Harbor Freight mask, replace the cartridges about once a year. And it's certainly, you wouldn't want to paint any two-part without a mask. Today, the sun came out finally, and I wanted to space out getting 3 coats of clear on, and I'm putting it on very thin. If you look at the spray pattern, it's not going to go on real wet like you put it on with a mop. It's not like painting a car. This is the way I get what I think is the best possible coat of clear on without running into a problem with runs or unequal clear and dirt in certain areas. Now, at the end of this job, I'm going to put some extra clear on this, because this is the part that takes a beating from getting on and off the bike, and anytime you're putting a bike on the spools, you got to grab this. So I really want this at the end of the job. I will put on more clear than I normally would, but for right now, I wanted to get on 3 thin coats, not 3 thick coats. That's why I'm leaving this in real time, So you can see that's going on almost like an airbrush, nice and thin. There's no chance you're going to get a run or a problem with that when it goes on thin like that. And that's just cheap insurance, to be honest. And right now, and you can see it's dull, it doesn't have a shine to it yet. And put that aside to dry for a half hour, 45 minutes. The sun will bake that up, get it nice and dry, and we'll be ready for the second coat. So for the second coat, I open up the nozzle about a quarter of a turn, and notice what I'm trying to do. I don't take my hand on and off the trigger every time I make a pass. The trigger stays down in most cases, not all, but most, for the whole part. The gun never stops spraying until you're done with the part, and that's a technique I learned from painting model airplanes. Now, I know other people paint differently, and they paint cars and boats and things that are, it's a totally, this way wouldn't work at all. But for me, and the fact that I'm doing it as a backyard mechanic without a spray booth and without anything, that almost nothing that doesn't come from Harbor Freight. So, and the result, I think, as I said, I think it speaks for itself, because I put my stuff right next to people that have $1,500 guns, and when it's buffed out, to tell you the truth, it's not a whole lot different. Now, of course, this color, because it does have pearl and metallic, and it's really a beautiful color. It's actually my favorite color of all the motorcycles. One of the things that I always run into, and boy, it was getting cloudy here toward the end, I got a little nervous. But one of the things I always remember is every time you put a coat of clear on, the color will get a little bit brighter. In some cases, it'll get a little bit darker. In the case it is blue, it changes dramatically from no clear to 3 coats of clear. And it'll always change color from when it's dull to when it's shiny. So because the rest of the motorcycle is totally buffed out, every part that's blue is buffed out, I won't really know what this part is going to look like in terms of the color match, even though I've painted it out of the same can of paint. But you can see already, as this is getting more and more clear, this is the 3rd coat, what happens? It starts to develop that deep glow, like almost like a candy apple color. And to me, this is, I waited a long time to get a blue one here. I didn't want the ones that were the other color, and I'm glad I did. And look at, now you can see a little more of the gloss. You can see the sky reflecting in it. And I walk around here, make sure, I don't like to leave it outside too long because we have birds in the neighborhood and squirrels, and who the hell knows, they're going to steal this part. Anyway, now I put it on the fluorescent lights. That allows me to see anything that's a giant flaw or something that needs to be addressed. Well, this has really been a nice day for painting. We had to duck raindrops, we had to wait it out. Drank a lot of coffee today waiting for this to clear up, but in the end we got the clear on. And what will happen now, this is going to sit at least 2 days, a day and a half, 2 days. I'll wet sand it out with 2000 and put on the final clear. But for right now, having this out in the garage for 24 hours, I feel like this was a really, really productive day. And I hope there was some good information on this if you're doing a project of your own. Now, on a work day like this, I like to look back at the evolution of this bike. Look at when I bought it with the silver and the flat paint and unpolished exhaust and blue wheels, and I like to just look at it and a tail tidy, that thing that comes with the bike. And I think it took me over 2 years, actually, if you count the work I'm doing now, probably more than 2 years, to bring it up to where it became my bike, and I was really, really happy with it. And when I put it next to a stock one with all the flat black stuff, it suits me a lot better. The unique wheels, way better than the flat wheels that came with it. And the custom windshields. Actually, I just cut that windshield up not long ago, a couple days ago. Anyway, it is a work in progress. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Please hit the like button if you did, and thank you so much for watching.